Welcome to another edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up. During this program, we will highlight the agenda items presented to the Lakeville City Council at their July 7th, 2014 meeting. First highlighted item on the agenda is item number 5B, Liquor Department 2013 Annual Report. And to give the background information on this agenda item is Liquor Manager Brenda Visnovic.
I'm here to present the 2013 annual report and 2014 mid-year, combining both. So our mission statement in the liquor department is that in partnership with the community, Lakeville Liquors is dedicated to serving the community through strict control and responsible sales of alcohol. We encourage moderation, we observe regulations, deliver quality service, promote community involvement, and provide financial benefits for the community. So by the numbers for last year, our sales were up 1.9%. They were at $15.3 million. They increased over the previous year by $170,000. Could have been better. There was this little road called 35W that was closed most of the year to one lane, and that kind of, we suffered a little bit, as did many businesses along that route. But the one area that we can say is that we increased our gross profit. That was up 2.8%. And when you look at the $170,000 increase in sales, our gross profit was up $108,000. Going into net operating income, again, that is where we actually saw the biggest increase. Our net operating income increased by 3.4% in 2013. And we did that by watching the dollars and by having the lowest operating costs in metro areas as a percent of sales. And we continue to do that. We're actually 3% lower than the state average, according to the latest state auditor's report. So just as is the mantra in the city of Lakeville, we run it lean. So looking at 2013 contributions that aided in reducing property taxes, we put $1.7 million back into the community back in 2013, with $837,000 going to the equipment fund, $100,000 going to the police station bonds, $70,480 to general fund as PILT. And if for people that don't understand what PILT is, it's very important that we get treated like any other business. So we make a payment to the general fund in lieu of taxes. So that's nearly $71,000 there. We also had several other things for administration, technology, and environmental resources. So last year, as far as accomplishments, it was kind of a rebuilding year for us. We hired 3 store managers. We actually had 2 store managers leave. One retired and another one decided to move to our neighbor in Farmington. So we're very proud that he took the step up as a director. And we also hired 2 assistant managers. Throughout, we worked various events, as we always do with Taste of Lakeville, Summer Splash, Zoo tasting events, all very, very important partnerships for us. And I served as the MMBA president last year, and I guess no one else appeared for the meeting because I was reelected this year. Yeah. Got to get better attendance at those meetings. We did, as a group, as liquor committee and as council and as staff, we actually completed the strategic business plan and new site analysis and came up with some conclusions there. As far as our philanthropic, which is very important to us, but we could not do any of this without our customers. It's very important that we give back to the community, not only through sales. I mean, that's one area, but we also want to give in other ways. So our customers, through various fundraisers within the store, actually donated $21,000, $8,349 for the food drive, over $5,000 for the fire department. So all of the officer vehicles now have AEDs in them, as they're often the first to respond to an accident or medical. $1,500 to the Yellow Ribbon Group for some equipment for returning veterans. and $6,600 to the Heritage Center. In addition, we do all of the events at the Arts Center for weddings, gatherings, and any adult or non-youth oriented concerts and events. So with that, we raised over $3,600. Taste of Lakeville, last year we coordinated 300 wines, raised $7,600 for the Rotary. Summer Splash, we coordinated the wine and beer and spirits tasting along with other staff from administration and Parks and Rec, and that event raised $9,700. And something we kind of inherited just because I have some horse auction dealing in my background. We coordinate an online auction which raised nearly $10,000 with donated items from the Heritage Center. So looking at this year, pretty amazing to look. Sales are going very well. 2014 year-to-date sales are up 2.1% and up $148,578. Now, considering last year we only increased our sales for the entire year $170,000, we're nearly to that point mid-year. But we really like our involvement with the community in other ways too, and with the Taste of Lakeville, we had a record year as far as participation from the vendors. That just continues to grow the more they learn about how important this event is for the community. So we coordinated over 400 wines and raised $9,600 for the Rotary. Cash for Canines, people love this fundraiser. With Zeus getting up there in age, we asked, Miller Coors was putting on a donation campaign for animals. And they said it could be any animal, and we came up with Cash for Canines. So we raised $6,440. That's going to be earmarked for the replacement of Zeus as he grows older and when he needs to retire. We also, through a random drawing with Miller Coors, won an additional $200 to go into that fund. This was a little bit of an accomplishment here. County Road 70 purchase agreement for another location, and that again was a great effort put out by Liquor Committee, City Administration, Finance, and Liquor Department. We actually ended up purchasing about 5 acres out there. Really, it was the best deal. We negotiated a much better value. We purchased both sites in order to better utilize the land because the one parcel was a little too large, the other was too small. So we were able to negotiate a better price on the 2 parcels. We'll be able to utilize the second parcel for drainage and soil grading cost savings. And we will sell that other parcel as a pad-ready site once we have our work accomplished. So as stated up there, since 2000, our space really has only increased 13%, but our sales have increased 211%, so a 4th location was coming up due. Now, upcoming, we have a very important event coming up this Saturday. It's the Lakeville Liquors Brew Battle, part of Panaprog. It will be at, this Saturday, 1 to 4 at the Arts Festival. We have over 30 breweries attending, over 100 beers. So we encourage people to come out and taste with us. That is a 21 and over event. And so is Summer Splash, which will be at the Lakeville Heritage Center on Saturday, July 26th, and that's 5 to 8. With that, I stand for any questions.
Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 8, consider amendments to Title 11 of the Lakeville City Code. And to provide the background information on this agenda item is Director of Planning, Daryl Morey.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Unfortunately, you get the B team tonight. Mr.
Let's
Licht,
not start that again.
Mr. Licht is, who is the author of this, is unable to attend due to a conflict, but in preparation for my presentation this evening, I watched his presentation to the Planning Commission at their meeting in June. And if he does watch the tape of this meeting, I do want him to know that he did an exemplary job at the Planning Commission presentation. I only hope I can do half as good as he did. So, given that, this zoning ordinance amendment was actually directed by the City Council. It was discussed at a work session on February 24th, and at that work session, the City Council directed staff to prepare an ordinance amendment that would allow chickens in residential district, subject to strict performance standards, for consideration by the Planning Commission. City staff, particularly Planning Department staff, has received several requests over the last couple years to allow chickens in residential development districts. Currently, our ordinance allows the keeping of chickens and other farm animals, which chickens are defined as a farm animal, on farm properties in agricultural districts. So there is an allowance for that in the community today. This is an issue that has gained some attention in other Twin Cities area communities based upon a couple of things. One of them is an interest in sustainable food sources, and the other is that there's folks that feel that chickens should be kept as pets and certain other types of farm animals, but we're dealing just with chickens this evening. In preparation for that, Planning Department staff researched a number of other cities in the Twin Cities area just to see, first of all, whether they allow chickens in residential districts, and if they did, what types of performance standards they had in place. And we prepared a table that showed that research that was performed by Associate Planner Dempsey, and that is listed as Exhibit B of the June 12th Dan Licht TPC memo. I know that that's something the City Council reviewed at the work session, but we did provide some updated information in that matrix. The amendment that's before you this evening would allow the keeping of chickens on single-family residential properties by administrative permit, subject to specific performance standards. The administrative permit would be valid for 1 year and would need to be reviewed and renewed annually so that there is accountability by the property owner with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Some of the performance standards that are proposed in this amendment, I'll just highlight a few of them, are as follows. The owner of the chickens must reside on the property to which the administrative permit was granted. There would be a maximum of 2 chickens, no roosters. The chickens must be kept within a coop from sunset to sunrise to prevent attracting predators and to minimize nighttime noise issues. The chicken coop must be constructed of wood materials, must be a minimum of 2 square feet per chicken and a maximum of 120 square feet. And I know that seems large, but that's based on our accessory building standards in the zoning ordinance. The coop must include an attached run that's enclosed by fencing of a minimum size of 5 square feet per chicken and a maximum size of 20 square feet per chicken. The coop and the run must be located in the rear yard, must be set back at least 20 feet from all property lines, must not be located within a drainage and utility easement, must be located closer to the owner's dwelling than any other adjacent dwelling, and must be screened from adjacent properties. Feed and waste must be contained so they don't cause a nuisance and don't pose a risk to public health, safety, and welfare. The chickens cannot be kept for breeding purposes, they cannot be slaughtered, and the eggs cannot be sold. And then finally, inspection of the property by city staff to verify compliance with the zoning ordinance regulations would be a requirement. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the zoning ordinance amendment at their June 19th meeting, and there was comment from 4 residents in attendance at the meeting. In addition, written and email comments were received from 11 residents prior to the public hearing and 3 residents following the public hearing. Of those 14 written or emailed comments, 6 expressed support for the proposed amendment and 8 did not support the proposed amendment. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended denial of the zoning ordinance amendment, their reasons being as follows. That chickens are more appropriate on farm properties in a rural agricultural setting. There was concerns about noise and odor in residential neighborhoods. The opportunity to keep chickens exists in the city today in agricultural districts, which represents approximately 12% of the area of the city that's zoned agricultural. And because they felt now is not the appropriate time to allow the keeping of chickens in single-family neighborhoods, that the issue could be revisited when the city is more built out. Staff is also recommending denial of the zoning ordinance amendment for the reasons stated by the Planning Commission. Planning and Community and Economic Development Department staff are trying to get in front of a bit an emerging trend in the Twin Cities area for microbreweries, brew pubs, and tap rooms. This is typically a use that you've seen in the core cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and those types of uses are now moving out into suburban areas. And we felt that this would be a good idea to get in front of this and be proactive and make allowances in our ordinance for these types of uses. The uses are regulated by state statute, liquor licensing requirements. As such, the proposed amendment does not address the operation per se, but rather the land use compatibility and the location of the uses. Hopefully not to bore you too much, but I'll give you a quick brief synopsis of each of the items that are listed in this amendment. It was an education process for me. Again, I have to thank Mr. Licht and the work that he did on this ordinance to pull this together. Brew on premises operations are essentially retail stores where you purchase the equipment and supplies for brewing small batches of malt liquor. A brewery is not regulated by state statute as to the quantity of beer produced, but a small brewery is, and that's limited to 20,000 barrels per year, again, under state statute. A brew pub is a small brewery with a restaurant on the premises. A distillery is a facility that produces distilled spirits and is not regulated by state statutes in terms of quantity produced, much like a brewery. But a micro distillery is limited, again, in production to not more than 40,000 gallons of distilled spirits per year. A farm winery includes the growing of grapes and production of wine on a farm property, with or without chickens. A tap room applies to breweries that allow on-sale consumption of the beer produced. And a tasting room applies to distilleries and farm wineries that allow the on-sale consumption of the distilled spirits and wine produced. So just a brief synopsis of the items that are contained in this amendment. In terms of the ordinance and where, as staff reviewed this, where we felt that they would be appropriate in our zoning districts and under what circumstances. Brew on premises and brew pubs are seen as more commercial in nature. As such, the proposed amendment would allow them as permitted uses in the C2, C3, and C CBD districts. Small breweries with tap rooms and micro distilleries with tasting rooms are a mix of industrial use involving the production of beer or the distilled spirits, with a commercial component that includes the customer traffic coming in to do the tasting. As such, we looked at these uses a little bit differently in terms of their allowance. The proposed amendment would allow them by conditional use in the C2, C3, CCBD districts, again because of the industrial component, and also in the I1 and I2 districts because of the commercial component, but as permitted uses within the office park and the ICBD districts. Breweries and distilleries, again, which are not regulated into the quantity produced, are proposed to be allowed by conditional use permit in the OP district and as a permitted use in the I1 and I2 districts. And then finally, farm wineries are proposed to be allowed as interim use permit in the AP and RA, our agricultural districts, given that at some point the property may be included within the future urban service area and be guided for urban land uses. So interim use was felt to be appropriate in that case. The performance standards for each of those types of uses would have to comply with the district standards where they are allowed, and those performance standards relate to lot size, setbacks, landscaping, exterior building materials, and signage. And then specific parking standards would be regulated by Chapter 19 of the zoning ordinance based upon the specific use. A public hearing on this zoning ordinance amendment was also held at the June 19th Planning Commission meeting. There was public comment from one resident just requesting some clarification on the proposed amendment, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval. Staff also recommends approval, and I can stand for questions.
Item number 8A, related to the keeping of chickens, was not approved by the Lakeville City Council. However, 8B, related to brew on premises brewing, was approved by the Lakeville City Council. Next highlighted item on the agenda was item number 9, presentation of the 2013 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Here is that presentation.
I would like to go over the results of the city's audit for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2013. The first thing I want to go over is just a brief recap of what our role is. You've received 3 documents as a result of the audit process, the first and main one being the city's Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. In addition to that, we issued some documents under the heading Single Audit and Special Purpose Reports, and you also received a management report from us, which is our executive summary. Our role is to come out and perform our audit procedures, provide the opinion that goes at the front of your comprehensive annual financial report. The responsibility for the numbers and the data that are included in that report does rest with city's management. We're not part of your internal controls. We're come and provide that independent audit opinion. In addition to that, something a little bit different for the city this year, you earned more than $500,000 in federal funding, mainly through an $825,000 highway planning and construction grant. Because of that, you are subject to a separate single audit of those federal awards expenditures for 2013. And as part of both that financial statement audit and that separate single audit, we test both your internal controls and compliance. And finally, the city is subject to an audit of compliance with Minnesota laws and regulations under an audit guide put out by the state auditor's office. As far as the results of the audit, I'm happy to say this was a very, very clean audit. First of all, from a process standpoint, I thought things went very well, as has been our experience here in the past. City staff was well prepared when we came out to perform the audit. Everything in order. Things went very smoothly. It was completed within the planned time. So very good process. As far as the results, we again issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the city's financial statements. We had no internal control or compliance issues to report on the financial statement audit. There were no findings that we were required to report under Minnesota legal compliance audit. As far as a separate single audit of federal awards, the city puts together a schedule of federal awards expenditures. We provided an opinion on that it is fairly stated in relation to the basic financial statements. And we also issue report letters on internal controls and compliance for federal single audit, and those were also clean and without exceptions. And something I always mention for a city where you only have a single audit maybe every 3-5 years, depending on the kind of funding you get. This is an area where it's much more common to find findings because it isn't something you necessarily do all the time, so it's always impressive to see a grant that's handled as cleanly and as well as this one when we audited it. So everything was very well in order and very well documented. Before I go on to some of the financial information, I do want to highlight one thing we mentioned in our management report, something kind of coming down the line from a future standpoint. We've included some comments in our management reports in the past, and I'm sure you've been reading some other articles about it and such. There's some changes coming in pension reporting that are going to affect your financial statements in a few years. In 2014, there's going to be a change in the reporting for most pension plans. So your Fire Relief Association, PERA that administers the public employee retirement plans which some of your employees belong, are going to have to implement GASB Statement 67, where they're going to be changing their reporting. And then in 2015, other governments that have employees in these plans, like the city, will have to implement GASB 68. And this is going to change a little bit. It is going to hit your financial statements only on the entity-wide financial statements. This won't change how you account for anything in your fund statements. But it will see you recording your proportionate share of any unfunded pension liability from a PERA in your entity-wide financial statements as a liability, and also if you have any unfunded liability related to your Fire Relief Association, that will also come on your financial statements. Again, it's not going to change the contributions you're making to PERA. It's not going to change how these run through your fund statements, but it will become a liability on that entity-wide financial statement in 2015. So I'll move on then to some of the financial information. Kind of broken this analysis into two pieces. You have two main fund types. Governmental and enterprise funds. Your governmental funds are the ones that are primarily supported through property taxes, including your general fund, special revenue, debt service, and capital projects funds. In these funds, you had a total of about $64.8 million at the end of 2013 in total fund balances. That was an increase of about $3.1 million from the year before. Most of the increase, as you can see in the top part of this presentation, was in committed fund balance category. Primarily, that was due to assets that were accumulated in some of your capital projects funds for future projects. In particular, you got quite a few utility connections due to some of the development going on in the city that are set aside in your stormwater, water, and sewer capital project funds, and also transferred some funds into the equipment and building capital projects funds that are they're committed for future capital projects. Assigned fund balance went down by $621,000, and that's primarily a function of your general fund budget. For 2013, your original budget had that you had set forth for the general fund, you had anticipated using $621,000 of existing fund balance. So that amount was assigned at the end of 2012. For 2014, you adopted a balanced budget, so there was no need to make that same assignment for 2013. So that's just a shift between the assigned and unassigned categories in your general fund. And finally, that unassigned fund balance category went down about $1.1 million from 2012 to 2013. And the primary cause there was transfers made out of the general fund. You transferred about $2.4 million out of the general fund for various purposes, mainly capital project and equipment purchase related. So drilling down within those governmental funds to the general fund, your primary operating fund, at the end of 2013, you had about $9.6 million in cash and investments in this fund and about $9.7 million in total fund balance. Your fund balance was down about $1.3 million from the year before. However, in your final budget, you had actually projected a spend down of almost $3 million. So you ended up about $1.2 million higher in your fund balance than was projected in your final budget. Most of that variance was on the revenue side. Your total general fund revenues were $21.2 million for 2013. That was almost 5%, or about $975,000 higher than projected in your final budget. That variance came mainly in two areas. Charges for services were about $294,000 over budget, and licenses and permits were about $686,000 higher than budget. Most of these are due to fees and permits related to development. Your residential building permits were up by about 33% from 2012 to 2013. So because of that increase in development, the fees that are generated related to that were higher than projected. On the expenditure side, you spent about $21.3 million in the general fund in 2013. That was about 1% or $222,000 below budget. You're actually under budget in 3 of the 4 departments shown here. General government was about $255,000 below budget due to savings in personnel costs and administration, planning, and IT. Public safety was about $238,000 below budget. That was due to some unfilled positions in the police department, lower number of fire calls than anticipated, also some savings on some of your contractual services. Parks and Recreation were about $110,000 under budget, again, mainly savings in salaries and benefits. The one area where you were over budget was Public Works. It was about $380,000 over budget, and that was primarily due to snow removal and street maintenance costs due to the number of snow events that you had during the previous winter. The other primary fund type of the city is your enterprise funds. You have 2 enterprise funds, the liquor operation and your utilities. At the end of 2013, you had just under $119 million in total net position in these 2 funds. The changes you see there, the net investment in capital assets went up by a little more than $3 million. That was almost entirely in the utility fund, primarily due to receiving about $3.3 million of contributed infrastructure from new development in the city. The unrestricted portion of net position went down by just under $2 million, and most of that was due to transfers from the liquor fund to support capital improvements and debt service in other governmental city funds. In the utility fund, your total net position at the end of the year was just over $113 million. Again, the majority of that, or about $104 million, represents your investment in net capital assets, leaving about $9.5 million in unrestricted net position. Total net position increased by $1.4 million in 2013. Again, most of that was due to the 3.3 million, contributed capital. Your utility revenues for the year were $9.1 million. That was down about 4.3%, or roughly $410,000 from 2012. Most of that was a reduction in water revenues, which were about $512,000 less than 2012. And you just heard about that as far as the amount of usage due to weather for irrigation was quite high in 2012. So as we've seen with all of our city clients, water sales were down to a more typical level in 2013. Operating expenses were about $10.7 million, up about 3.5% from the year before. My last 2 slides are on your liquor fund, which your liquor operations manager has already gone over most of this, so I'm going to go over these fairly quickly. Your net position at the end of the year in the liquor fund was about $5.5 million, down $281,000 from the year before. In this case, there's only about $1.1 million of that represents your investment in capital assets. The rest of that is $4.2 million is unrestricted, and you have $324,000 set aside due to a bond covenant in restricted net position. Your gross sales were $15.4 million, up about $170,000 from the year before, about 1.1%. And that generated net operating income of about $1.7 million. And due to the transfers out of this fund of about $1.75 million, that's why you generated that small decline in total net position. Some historical operating figures here. Your gross profit as a percentage of sales and operating income as a percentage of sales over the last 5 years has been improving slightly each year. I did take a big jump in 2012 in both of those ratios. That was primarily due to 2 factors. One, the completion of your Cedar Avenue store and that coming fully online, and also that was the year that you changed your hours to stay up until 10 o'clock to compete with some of the surrounding communities. And in that year, your sales went up by about $850,000, and expenditures only went up about $19,000. So you see the big jump there in both the gross profit percentage and operating income. Compared to the statewide average, your gross profit percentage, and the last state numbers were from 2012, but your gross profit percentage was right in line. You were at about 25.7%, and in 2012, other metro area off-sale only liquor operations were at about 25.8%. Where you're much better than average is in the operating income as a percent of sales. That average for the same group of metro area off-sale only stores was a little over 8.5%, where you were realizing about 10.8% due to the low costs that you have in your operation. So that was everything I had intended to cover from a number standpoint.
All right.
Item number 9 was accepted by the Lakeville City Council. Next highlighted item on the agenda is item number 10, presentation of the School Road Safety Task Force report. And to provide the information on this agenda item is City Administrator Steve Milkey.
The item before you tonight is acceptance of a School Road Safety Task Force report. As a bit of background, the council is well aware that unfortunately and tragically, last December there was the loss of a life on Dodd Road. One of our students traveling to school lost her life in a traffic accident. That occurrence caused a significant amount of input to the City Council on a variety of issues, and the issue of Dodd Road was just one, but we received a lot of input from people through emails and phone calls about concerns about the safety of youth as they're going to school, not just on the roads, but as they're walking to school and as they're on the school properties. As such, the City Council determined it appropriate to form a task force to consider issues of both vehicle and pedestrian safety as youth access schools, as well as a review of policy issues relating to how youth are making their way to school, what happens when they are there, how do we enforce policies and laws that are intended to increase safety of youth accessing schools. And this, the City Council formed a task force. 9 individuals were appointed to that task force, and they met for a series of 4 different in-depth meetings over a 3-month period, and they have since issued a report. I do want to state publicly the names of the task force members because they put not just the meetings in, but they spent quite a bit of personal time and dedication to this topic. But the membership includes Laura Beam, who is a School District 192 representative, Bart Davis, Lakeville City Council member, Dave Delmonico, who is a School District 196 representative, Brent James, who is a Lakeville resident, Judy Kelleher, District 194 School Board member, Paul Kraus, Dakota County Commissioner, Colleen LeBeau, City of Lakeville Council member, Olivia Shoemaker, who is a Lakeville North High School student, and Jim Skelly, District 194 School Board member. Each of those 9 people were tasked with a number of things, but each of them adopted, if you will, or were assigned 2 schools or 2 educational facilities. There are 18 educational facilities in Lakeville, and each one of the members personally reviewed both the start and the stop times at those facilities. They reviewed public information, emails, and phone calls that were received. They spoke personally to the principal or the leader within each of the schools to find out what issues they were hearing from parents and from youth, and to gain their own personal knowledge. And so the group had quite a base of knowledge to look at as they were studying the charge that was placed to them by the City Council. The result of the work was a report that is now being presented to you for your acceptance. Within there are 13 individual issues that were identified regarding roads and road safety for youth. There were 10 issues that were identified and prioritized by the group for pedestrian and bicycle access to school facilities. And there were 11 issues that were prioritized for policy level or enforcement types of issues. They're all identified within the report. You'll also find that there were a host of other issues which weren't prioritized by the group, but nonetheless were identified and stated as issues for consideration. The task force report itself is intended not to solve the issues, it's intended to identify the issues. And thus, the language that you see in the report attempts to show that an issue has been identified as a potential safety issue. The report leaves it to the city council and the school boards and the county to determine how best to respond to these issues. And the task force discussed how that might occur, and within this report it's identified and it's recommended that the city council and the districts, all 3 districts and the county, consider forming some form of a staff level task force or a group who would be charged with looking at these issues and seeing if there are some responses or some methods of improving the conditions that were identified. And thus, it'll be left for the city council to determine how you wish to respond to this report. The report itself is available on the city website. There are a host of pieces of information attached to the website that provide details. There's some interactive abilities to see how school boundaries might affect participation and how people access schools. There's information about the county and the city CIPs and how capital improvement plans, and how those are impacted. So as the city council, I know, has already discussed as its capital planning some recommendations on how you might take some of the issues on road projects and incorporate them into the city and county CIP. There are other issues here which I think deserve some attention going into the future and attempts to improve the situation. So again, this task force has completed its work. The request to you is to accept their report and then provide guidance at some point for staff or others to respond to.
Item number 10 was accepted by the Lakeville City Council. Well, those were the highlighted items presented to the council at their July 7th, 2014 meeting. If you have any questions or comments regarding these agenda items, please feel free to call City Hall. The number is 952-985-4400. Thanks for watching this edition of Lakeville City Council Wrap-Up.
Come out and enjoy this year's Summer Splash, a fundraising effort for the Lakeville Heritage Center on Saturday, July 26th from 5 till 8 p.m. This event features wine, craft beer, food, silent auction, and more. Tickets are $25 for this 21 and older event. Join us for Summer Splash at the Heritage Center and support a great community facility. Tickets available at lakevilleMN.gov.